Jump into a story that's all made up, filled with fun surprises and wild adventures that come straight from the imagination. This tale is completely fictional, taking you on a journey where anything can happen. Get ready to explore and enjoy a world where the only limit is how big we can dream. Dallas, Texas, August 10th, 2014. The calm of an upscale neighborhood is broken as police seal off a house on Maple Drive. Inside, a scene unfolds that contradicts the area's peacefulness. What started as a typical relationship has escalated into a complex mesh of lies, betrayal, and eventually murder. The ensuing story will make you question how well you truly know those around you. In the year 2000 in Dallas, Sarah and James Wilson were the type of couple everyone looked up to. From the outside, their lives appeared flawless. Sarah, at 26, was a thriving real estate agent known for her engaging personality and skill in securing deals, ranking her among the top agents in Dallas. James, 28, worked as an investment banker. His role was challenging, yet he excelled under the pressure, always striving for greater success. They lived in a spacious home in a wealthy area, enjoying all the comforts that their prosperous careers afforded them. Luxurious cars, sophisticated dinner gatherings, and a reputation as the perfect couple. Within their social sphere, James's younger brother, Chris, was often at their home. Chris, 24, was an aspiring musician whose relaxed demeanor sharply contrasted with James's more structured and serious attitude. Chris's presence brought a spark of energy wherever he went. Unburdened by the heavy responsibilities that James bore, Chris led a spontaneous life, dedicating himself to his music, though he hadn't found much success yet. Nevertheless, he stayed positive and persistent in pursuing his dreams. Chris frequently stayed with Sarah and James, especially when he was between concerts or needed a place to stay. Gradually, Chris became a fixture in their home. Initially, Sarah and Chris's interaction was purely platonic, exchanging thoughts on music, life, and aspirations. However, as time went on, their discussions grew deeper and more personal. They began sharing secrets and spending more time together while James was away at work. By 2005, the relationship between Sarah and Chris had deepened beyond mere friendship. It evolved into a secret, passionate affair that took both by surprise. Despite knowing it was wrong, the thrill and secrecy of their rendezvous made it too exhilarating to end. They met clandestinely, choosing spots where they wouldn't be recognized, sometimes in a hotel across town, other times in the back seat of Chris's car in a remote area. They communicated through coded messages, keeping their affair hidden from everyone, particularly James. As time passed, their connection intensified. Being apart became agonizing for both, and the risk of discovery only fueled the passion of their affair. They knew they were treading a perilous path, but the thought of ending it was unbearable. Chris started pushing Sarah to leave James, weary of the secrecy and wanting a life together in the open. However, Sarah was conflicted. She deeply loved Chris, but she was also used to the lifestyle she had with James, the stability, the luxury, and the social esteem. It was a lot to let go of. Torn between two worlds, Sarah felt unable to commit to either completely. By 2012, the strain began to show. The excitement of their secret meetings waned as the harsh reality of their situation dawned on them. They understood the affair couldn't last indefinitely. Sarah became more distant, anxious about being exposed. Chris, frustrated, couldn't grasp why Sarah wouldn't leave James. The tension led to frequent arguments, turning what was once a passionate relationship into one marred by doubt and discontent. In May 2014, James, who had always been suspicious of Chris's regular visits, decided to investigate further. He had noticed subtle shifts in Sarah's demeanor. The way she smiled at her phone, the late-night work meetings, and the quiet phone calls she thought he couldn't hear raised James's suspicions. He hired a private investigator to uncover the truth. For weeks, the investigator shadowed Sarah, documenting her every move. On June 10, 2014, the investigator handed James a folder full of photographs and text messages that confirmed his worst fears. The evidence was clear. Sarah was having an affair with Chris, The betrayal struck James deeply. He felt a rage like never before, but managed to keep his composure. He calmly thanked the investigator and started planning his next steps. On June 15, 2014, James confronted Sarah. It was a warm evening when she came home from another so-called meeting. Sarah was shocked to find James waiting in the living room, evidence spread out on the coffee table. Though his expression was calm, his eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen. Quietly, James asked her to sit down and began to show her the photos one by one. Sarah's face paled as she realized she was caught. She first tried to deny it, claiming the photos were doctored, but the proof was overwhelming. James then showed her the printed text messages, each more incriminating than the last. Sarah broke down, pleading for forgiveness, saying the affair meant nothing and that she still loved James. However, James was unmoved by her pleas. His trust was irreparably broken. After hours of strained conversation, James stood, gave Sarah one final look, and left the room. He never raised his voice or shed a tear, but the look in his eyes showed a profound change within him. Over the following days, James was consumed by thoughts of revenge, filled with anger and betrayal. He wanted to act, but knew any action needed to be cautious and well thought out. He began researching how to commit the perfect crime, spending hours online studying cases of murder. He read articles, watched videos, and downloaded books on criminal psychology. By June 20th, 2014, James had crafted a plan. It wasn't enough to just end Sarah's life. He wanted Chris to suffer too. James decided he would kill Sarah and make it look like Chris was to blame. He believed that with meticulous planning, he could execute his plan without getting caught. James's detailed nature meant he carefully planned every part of his scheme. He started by gathering items that would link Chris to the crime scene. James planted some of Chris's belongings in the house, items that would suggest his presence at the crime. He also began altering the digital messages between Sarah and Chris, crafting a narrative of a serious argument between them. He was confident the police would find this, and it would reinforce the motive for Chris. By July 1st, 2014, James had prepared everything he needed. All that remained was to choose the perfect time to act. Outwardly, James remained composed, continuing with his daily activities as usual. However, inside, he was boiling with anger, eagerly counting down until he could carry out his vengeance. On August 1st, 2014, the plan that had been simmering since the discovery of the affair was ready to be set in motion. The betrayal had transformed James's initial shock into a firm resolution. He concluded that Sarah's life must end and Chris must be blamed for it. This decision wasn't made impulsively, but was the result of cold and calculated planning. James knew precision was crucial. Every detail had to align flawlessly. He could not afford any slip-ups that might link him to the murder. His first move was to falsify evidence to implicate Chris. James started by collecting items that would later suggest Chris was at the scene. This included placing traces of Chris's DNA around the house, which James meticulously planted on various objects. In the days leading up to the act, he focused on erasing any traces that could connect him to the impending crime. He cleaned all surfaces he might touch and ensured that any potential evidence was devoid of his fingerprints. James also began placing evidence where it would be easily discovered by the police. He had secretly obtained some of Chris's blood, storing it in a small vial at the back of his fridge. This blood was key to framing Chris. James was confident that once the police found it, they would immediately suspect Chris as the murderer. August 9th, 2014, was the date James had circled on his calendar. He had meticulously reviewed his plan multiple times, ensuring nothing was overlooked. By the day's arrival, James appeared calm, his emotions deeply concealed. He went about his usual routine, working and chatting with colleagues, as if it were just another day. However, internally, James was aware that by dawn the next day, everything in his life would be irrevocably altered. That evening, he made his final preparations. He chose the kitchen as the location for the confrontation with Sarah. It was easy to clean and a place where Sarah felt most at ease. James prepared 2 glasses of wine, one for himself and one for Sarah. The wine intended for Sarah was spiked with a strong sedative he had acquired weeks earlier, purportedly for sleep assistance. James then waited in the living room, pretending to watch TV until he heard the familiar sound of Sarah's car in the driveway. It was 10 p.m. when Sarah entered the house. She appeared weary but managed a slight smile, which vanished as soon as she saw James. She sensed something was amiss, but James quickly soothed her, claiming he wanted to discuss their issues and forgive her for her actions. Feeling reassured, Sarah accepted the wine he offered. As they conversed, James pretended he was interested in repairing their relationship, and Sarah, deceived by his act, began to unwind. But as time passed, she started feeling drowsy, her head growing heavy. James observed carefully, noting when her eyelids began to droop. Within a few minutes, Sarah was out cold, her head drooping at the table. James didn't hesitate. He moved her limp form to the garage, where he'd set up everything in advance. He dropped one of Chris's guitar picks next to Sarah's body to suggest it had fallen during a confrontation. Next, he used the vial of Chris's blood he'd collected earlier, dabbing it on Sarah's clothes in obvious spots. James was sure this would convince the police that Chris was responsible. He then picked up a distinctive kitchen knife that Chris often used, knowing it would immediately be associated with him. With this knife, James inflicted a precise stab wound to Sarah's chest, matching the blade's dimensions. His familiarity with crime scene tactics allowed him to stage a believable scene of a struggle. He arranged Sarah to look as though she had tried to resist her attacker, scattered some items to suggest a fight, and placed more of Chris's belongings around to frame the narrative of a deadly altercation. After setting the stage, James carefully erased any sign of his own presence, cleaning surfaces and removing any personal traces. He was thorough, ensuring the only evidence would implicate Chris. The next morning, August 10th, 2014, at 8 a.m., James called the police. He put on a voice thick with manufactured distress, reporting the grim discovery of his wife in the garage. The police were quick to arrive, turning the quiet home into a site of urgent investigation as they began to piece together the evidence. James convincingly portrayed the devastated spouse. He consistently informed the detectives that Chris must have been responsible, and the evidence at the scene appeared to confirm his assertion. The knife, the guitar pick, and the bloodstains all pointed to Chris, leading the detectives to swiftly secure a warrant for his arrest. On August 11th, 2014, Chris was taken into custody, bewildered and shocked as he learned he was being accused of murdering Sarah Wilson. Despite his protests of innocence, the overwhelming evidence made his situation dire. From a distance, James observed, his face expressionless, as his meticulous plan played out perfectly. That morning, the atmosphere was charged as police officers descended on Chris's apartment. He had barely started his day when their knocking resonated in the still corridor. Opening the door while still sleepy, Chris was met with the serious faces of the detectives. They announced his arrest for the murder of Sarah. Dumbfounded, Chris was handcuffed and escorted to the police car, his thoughts racing to piece together what was happening. At the police station, Chris was led into a bare interrogation room designed to unsettle. The detectives sat opposite him, their faces unreadable, and began to interrogate him about his ties with Sarah, focusing particularly on the affair and the specifics of the night of August 9th. Chris spoke truthfully, admitting to the affair but strongly denying any involvement in Sarah's death. He declared his love for her and his incapacity to harm her. Nevertheless, the detectives were unconvinced. The stack of evidence against him was too significant to dismiss. They presented the incriminating items one by one: the knife, the guitar pick, the blood, all suggesting his guilt. They also showed him the incriminating text messages between him and Sarah, increasing the pressure during the interrogation. The messages between Chris and Sarah showed plans for secret rendezvous and a future together, providing what appeared to be a motive for murder in the eyes of the law. Chris was devastated, understanding how incriminating it all looked, yet he knew he was innocent. The harsh reality that he was being framed struck him, but he was at a loss about how or why it was happening. By August 15th, 2014, the detectives started to find flaws in James's account. His unflappable demeanor, which first seemed like strength, began to look suspiciously calm for someone who had just lost his wife so violently. This prompted the detectives to scrutinize James's alibi more closely. They checked security footage from cameras around the neighborhood, hoping to confirm his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Surprisingly, the footage captured James's car leaving his home several times that night, contradicting his claim of staying in. This discrepancy was crucial, and the detectives pursued this new lead vigorously. They questioned why James had left his house and where he had gone. Additionally, they noted his unusual willingness to cooperate with the investigation, which was atypical for someone who had endured such a traumatic event. This eagerness to assist only deepened their suspicions that James might be concealing something. By August 18, 2014, armed with evidence from the security footage, the detectives secured a warrant to search both James's office and home, suspecting his involvement in the crime. They conducted a thorough search of his office, examining his computer, files, and personal items for any connections to the murder. It didn't take long for the detectives to uncover alarming evidence on James's computer, a series of internet searches that revealed a disturbing intent. James had looked up terms like how to frame someone for murder and perfect crime on the internet in the weeks before Sarah's death. These discoveries marked a pivotal moment in the investigation, strongly suggesting that James had premeditated Sarah's murder and meticulously set up the scene to frame Chris. Further searching at James's house brought to light even more conclusive evidence. In his garage, hidden away, was a box containing items linking him directly to the crime: gloves, cleaning supplies, and a vial of Chris's blood. This discovery solidified the detectives' suspicions that James's intricate plot was coming apart. By August 20th, 2014, equipped with the new findings, the detectives acted swiftly. James was arrested at his office, where he had been conducting his usual business, seemingly unaffected by the unfolding events. He was charged with the murder of Sarah Wilson and the attempted framing of his brother, Chris. The arrest stunned everyone acquainted with James, who was always regarded as the successful, dependable older brother, the one who seemingly had everything under control. Now, that perception was completely dismantled. James was detained in a holding cell, awaiting trial, while Chris was released from custody. His name cleared, but his life irrevocably altered. The betrayal by his own brother deeply wounded Chris, and the loss of Sarah remained a profound sorrow. In October 2014, James's trial became a media sensation. Journalists swarmed the courthouse, capturing every twist and turn of the proceedings. The prosecution meticulously laid out their case against James, detailing the evidence for the jury. They presented the security footage, the incriminating items planted in the scene, and the damning internet searches that unveiled James's nefarious intentions. Chris testified, recounting his relationship with Sarah and how James had deceitfully manipulated him, adding a powerful personal element to the legal proceedings. Chris spoke about his remorse over the affair, but he also expressed his astonishment and hurt over the extreme betrayal by his own brother. The courtroom grew quiet as Chris detailed the events leading to Sarah's demise, his voice thick with emotion. James's defense argued that he had been driven to insanity by the affair, suggesting that his actions were due to a momentary break in mental stability. But the jury found this unconvincing. The evidence was too strong, and the deliberate and calculated nature of the crime was undeniable. On November 2nd, 2014, after 3 days of jury deliberation, a verdict of guilty was reached. James was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This sentence marked the conclusion of a case that had deeply shocked the community and shattered a family. Chris was forced to piece together the fragments of his life. Although cleared of any criminal wrongdoing, the repercussions of the affair were severe. He lost his lover, his brother, and his peace of mind. The story of the Wilson brothers serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly life can spiral out of control and how deep-seated secrets can destroy close-knit families. This story prompts us to ponder what can drive a person to such desperate actions. Was it the betrayal by a spouse he once cherished, or was it a convoluted sense of control that consumed him? Let me know your thoughts, and remember to subscribe for more explorations into the complex layers of human nature. If this story captured your attention, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more gripping tales. Make sure you watch the whole video to not miss any twists. Your likes and subscriptions help us bring more of these intriguing stories to light. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think drove James to the edge?